to episode 10. Oh my goodness, of Branding and the Beast. I'm so glad that you're here with us. My name is Shaun Bernstein of the Right Stuff Agency, and my wonderful co host.
Alicia Disantis of 38th and KIP Design and Marketing. So good to be here.
Alicia and I are over the moon today. I just posted this afternoon, and so did Alicia as well, of the podcast statistics that, out of the 3 or 4 million podcasts out there, only about 20% of them make it this far. And we've noticed it within ourselves that, in the last 2 or 3 episodes, we've really kind of felt like we're hitting our stride. And I hope that you, as our listeners and viewers, feel the same way, because I think we're just getting started.
Yeah, that 20% really struck me because it's like, what's there, 3 to 4 million podcasts out there, and so many just sit idle. And it makes me feel like so much about, we talked about personal branding in the last episode, and just the concept around follow through and what that means as a professional and just what that means as part of your personal brand. That if you commit to doing something, you gotta try your darndest to follow through with it. And I'm just stoked that people have put up with us this long, that people are still willing to come on this show and be our guests.
Not only the still willing, but more people are willing. I'm finding people who are, more and more saying, yeah, I watch the show. I'm listening to the show. People who I have not paid money to do so. So that's exciting. I can joke about our one viewer or our one listener, but we have more than that. And it is so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm stoked, and I'm really, really excited about our guest today, and excited to talk about consumer packaged goods.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. Jared is a mentor of mine, and I'm so thrilled that he's agreed. I, had him in my sights from our first episode, and I'm glad that we're finally making it happen. And I think it piggybacks really well onto our last episode with Anna Hawkett, because Anna was amazing talking about, personal branding and the importance of personal branding for professionals, as well as, for even CEOs and heads of companies to sort of have a personal brand. And that's great. But when you think of branding classically, you think of the CPG world. I think of actually building a physical brand around a product. And how do you do that in the 21st century? How do you do that in the digital world? How do you do that in the world where, commerce patterns are changing? And when so many categories seem so full, when you have these historic brands that are decades or even, over 100 years old with these, stellar reputations that are synonymous with a category, how do you break into a market with something new and a new idea?
Exactly, exactly. I've been really focused on product positioning lately. Not so much CPG, because I have 0 experience in CPG, but the concept of the not so much the brand positioning, like what your brand stands for, but what your products stand for within that brand. So, a lot of CPG brands, like Crest, for example, or, was it Johnson& and Johnson? I can't remember who owns Crest, but they own all these different, products. So you have Dove, you have, Tide, all these different ones, and each one has their own product position and tone and sort of audience they're serving. So it's really fascinating how you can do that in a well, it's incredible to be able to do that at all in such a highly saturated market as CPG. I mean, just going to the grocery store, if we're talking about food and seeing all the different types of packaging. And if you're if you're not just going for the how do they break it down? There's like the quantitative, the price, going after the price point for the customer as compared to going after like the lifestyle brand. Like how do you even showcase that in such a crowded marketplace in 2023?
Well, and part of the work that I do, which is interesting because I'm all about taking things broad and really telling the story to a broad audience, not counting people out. And I think a lot of brands have picked up on that message as well. It used to be such targeted marketing for a certain consumer, whether it was, based on race or ethnicity or gender. Look at how many products on a store shelf targeted mothers. And, as mothers, as homemakers and housewives, as it, once was. And I mean, look at there's a coffee brand in the States, Horton Hardart, less work for mother. That was sort of their pitch. And you
Mhm.
wouldn't see that really today. It's if you see it, it's much more subtle. So if you see something like a Tide, you see usually blended families, interfaith families, mixed race families, same-sex couples. It's really about targeting a wide swath of consumers while still evoking those same emotions, but being a lot more inclusive, not leaving anybody out. So it's a really interesting pivot.
Absolutely. So one of my favorite CPG brands of all time, one of my favorite brands of all time. So this is a big thing for me. And I've been waiting for this moment to talk about this on this podcast. Ritter Sport, the chocolate company. Are you familiar with them?
Are those are the small square
They're the
ones?
squares. Yep.
Oh, I had one the other day. Don't
Yep.
tell anyone. Oh, it's so
So
good.
they're not super big in the United States, and I became privy to them when I was in Hamburg, and they had an enormous display that took over the entire Hamburg train station of these giant um, cloths, these banners that hung vertically with all of their chocolates in rainbow, in a beautiful rainbow vertical layout, because every single one of their flavors is a different color. And they have their stores designed that way too. And the focus is on the ingredients that are in it. And not a lot of brands do that. Like you just said, that Tide focuses on the multi generational. This chocolate focuses on the elements that are actually in it and nothing else. And that's
And it's
beautiful.
such a pure product. It's not, overly saturated with fillers and other ingredients. It really is, you can taste, and I think I looked at the ingredient label. I bought a marzipan bar. I like marzipan, which is, controversial in and of itself. And it was basically just dark chocolate and marzipan and, a couple other things, I'm sure, but nothing too crazy. It wasn't, 30 ingredients long, and that was kind of refreshing.
Yeah, it is tremendous what they've done with use of color and simplicity and like having your favorite flavor, having the color associated with it. It almost becomes like a badge. It's almost like a tribalism. Like, oh, I like the sky blue coconut one, or I like this. And you instantly recognize it and you can find it on the shelf. And it's incredible.
It's so tasty. They're probably bigger here than they are in the States because they are available here. Not everywhere, but they're available.
Yeah, not much here.
My favorite brand is probably from within my own family. To make a long story short, my great grandfather came to Canada without a word of English and a couple bucks to rub together. My great grandmother sold flowers to facilitate enough money for him to buy a cow. The first word in English he learned was milk, and he went around door to door selling milk. And then one cow became another cow, and he built up a small dairy. This is all in northern Ontario. This is a place called Timmins, home of Shania Twain and some other notables. And he built up this business and built it up and built it up. And by the time my grandfather took it over, it was one of the largest employers in the city. And then he kept growing it and he bought up other brands. And my grandmother was heavily involved in the branding. She was really, the brains behind the operation, but she used to do radio jingles and she had fun marketing campaigns. And so there's a lot of paraphernalia from the business left over, not just in my parents' home, but in a lot of homes from people from that part of the country. They have the old milk bottle caps and they have the old glass bottles, and it's actually kind of a collector's item, which is neat. And by the time he sold the business, he had come down to Toronto and he was on store shelves throughout Ontario. It was the largest private dairy I think in Ontario, um, but and had a couple different names that are associated, under that umbrella. But started from nothing, and really with enough creativity, built up a fairly impressive brand. So it's one that I've grown up around and one that I'm proud of still. But knowing kind of the backstory of what went into that brand creation and creating that brand loyalty and some of the marketing is a point of pride.
It's unbelievable. Is is there anything in the branding that they've done, which I'm guessing is, 70, 90 to 70 to 50 years old, that you think still resonates in today's market?
That's an interesting question. I think creating, and I haven't seen all the ads, but I think creating a story, creating a point of pride behind your brand. My grandfather, certainly built up a personal brand. There's no question, and was a big personality around town, and his father even more so. Um, and I think they never shied away from that. And they never sort of shied away from those immigrant roots. And, it didn't need to be the, main point of sale. But it certainly was one that they incorporated into building the business. And I really respect that. But I want to get to our guest.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Jared. Jared Kligerman is the president of the think tank, which is a marketing and communications agency based in Toronto. They work with some of the biggest brands on both sides of the Canada-US border, to really sort of help them stand out from the crowd, whether they have a strong foothold in the market, or they're new to the game and they're looking to gain that position. But one of the things that really makes Jared unique to this conversation is he doesn't just talk the talk; he's actually walked it himself. And for the past couple of years, he and his wife Lindsay, who are, full disclosure, good friends of ours, spent the past few years running a company called Wander, which was a new savory peanut butter brand that was, working on incorporating international flavors, spiced, not spicy, as he'll tell you, to make for a really unique product. And so we want to talk to him about, his journey with Wander, his journey through business, and just, soak up some of his unending marketing wisdom.
I can't wait. Let's get cracking.
Let,
No
let's
pun
bring him up.
intended with the nut butter.
There you go. Hey everyone. So we are so excited to welcome Jared Kligerman. Jared, we did your bio just before you got on here. And we want to get some pump up action going, get everyone excited to see you, because I don't think they realize how lucky they are and we are to have you join us. So thanks for coming.
Oh, my pleasure, and you are far too kind. It is my absolute pleasure and pride and privilege to be on the podcast, especially for this momentous one to wrap up season one. Congrats to you. What just an amazing accomplishment.
Well, it's neat. I was saying I had you in the sights, from the second that we started this thing. So to have you as the last guest of season one is pretty fitting. I like that as a nice little cap to all of it.
You better have a good surprise question for him. I want a real showstopper question.
Ooh, that's
Have
fun.
you
So
have
no
one picked
boxers
out?
or briefs or anything. Like we got to go real deep.
Real, yeah. This is a new thing we've started in our last episode, and something we want to integrate more in season two is surprise questions. Just random, irreverent stuff, but good
I
stuff,
love it. I love it. It's those random questions that bring out some unexpected gems, get you thinking about something different, catches people off guard, so you get that really honest answer. And I'll answer boxer abuse and say boxers, specifically man-made. I will shout them out because it's the only boxer company I've ever cared about, ever.
I've got to check
You
them out.
just
I think I'm
posted about
familiar.
that.
I did just
I
post
just saw
about
a
that.
post.
So yeah, so it's a bunch of guys up in Montreal who've just designed a really nice pair of boxers. It's the fabric. If you go into the upper end of boxers, I've been in and out of all the big brands that have come out over the last little while with a specialty feel and it's so silky. But these guys definitely have that too, and that's not a differentiator anymore. But what is different about them is the way they've designed their the position of the flap at the front of the boxers, shall we say. It just makes it a very comfortable wear. They're hands down the best I've ever worn, and I have gone exclusively to them, which I never thought I'd say about my boxers.
See, until they've got a flap at the front and a flap at the back, I don't know if I'm really interested.
Shaun, I will find those
Shaun,
for you someday. Be prepared for the weirdest birthday present ever.
June 2nd, my friend, June 2nd. let's let's take it back on course, and I am leaving that part in. Let's take it back on course. How did you fall into working in the CPG space?
It really comes down to relationships. I got into the CPG space. I should actually back up. So I was indirectly in it for most of my career. My father's been in and around food, so I've always been in and adjacent to it. Coming out of my MBA, I got into management consulting, where I had a number of clients in the CPG space. And that's like kind of my first initial exposure to it. But really, it was about 6 years ago when a friend of mine from my MBA, guy I met on day one of orientation, you can't tell I'm sitting down, I'm 6'8". So pretty tall. This other guy, Mike, is also quite tall. And so we literally did the tall guys looking over everybody's heads and catching eyes and kind of slowly made our way to each other. But anyways, he called me up about 6 years ago and said, hey, try to be in business a couple times. And for due diligence reasons, we never moved forward. I have an opportunity for us that I think would be amazing. I want to take over this marketing agency and I want you to come run it for me. And after I picked my jaw back up off the ground, I was like, what exactly does that mean, Mike? This is amazing, but what do you mean? He's like, come be the president of this thing. And so that's what really got me really deep into CPG was, so I run the think tank. We're an omni-channel marketing agency that really focuses on shopper marketing. If you're not familiar with shopper marketing, don't feel bad. I certainly had no idea what it was 6 years ago, at least not really well. And so really what that means is that our campaigns and strategies are geared towards driving a consumer to try or buy your product or service. So while we might use something like social media, our primary focus is how do we get them to go from social to your website to buy, or from social to get into their car and drive over to the grocery store where you're listed to buy that product. So everything we do is multi-touch, multi-channel, and as a result, we tend to work with a lot of larger brands, although I have a deep, deep, deep passion for emerging brands and small business. And so in my almost 6 years of running the agency now, we've been trying to find ways to work with smaller brands, which has not been the easiest, but I do end up spending a lot of time talking to small brands who aren't ready for my agency. Probably about 60% of my time is spent with them, giving them marketing ideas and making introductions or connecting them people who can help them grow the company from where they're at to be at a size where now I can come work with them and do a really cool omni-channel campaign or a huge contest with the prize of you and three friends going to Ibiza for a weekend party, which is legitimately a campaign we've run. So just kind of being in a space really forced me to get a really deep understanding of what CPG is, what that means from a branding standpoint, what that means from a marketing standpoint, and really trying to understand that ultimately led me to 2.5 years ago launching my own brand, Wander, with my wife, to really understand that at a really granular level, because I'm a big believer that theory and secondhand knowledge only gets you so far. And at some point, you're not going to be able to execute anymore at the level you want. And when you hit that point, it means you just got to get your hands dirty and go in and do it. And so that's what I did. So in a very roundabout way, Shaun, that's the answer to your question of how I got into CPG and what I do in CPG now as well.
I'm chomping at the bit. I want to talk about Wander because
Nice.
it's brilliant. And as a nut butter lover, I mean, I literally eat it every single day.
She's also
And
vegetarian, I should add. So, good
yes, it's a
protein.
good source of protein for me.
It was really clear from the beginning that I wanted to have a natural product that was versatile and could be used in lots of different ways. We kind of started off with 3 SKUs and started off with Thai, Moroccan, and Indian are the three, all inspired by the food that I cook on a regular basis. And the whole idea for Wander came when I was making this Thai noodle dish, making a Thai sauce, and very big air quotes, because the sauce is like peanut butter, sriracha, some sesame oil, and a squirt of lime. Like, that's not really Thai. You need lemongrass and lime leaves and ginger. And I was just kind of thinking about that. I kind of clued in, like, oh, we have all these sweet peanut butters. Why don't we have a savory peanut butter? And so I turned to talk to my wife about it, and I kind of noticed this pot, that clean pot, to be clear, was sitting on my stove. I'm like, oh, we just made a Moroccan stew in that, and that has this peanut butter in it too. I cook a lot of Indian, not so much peanut butter in Indian, but you have peanuts, and so those flavors kind of blend. And one of the first things I did after having this idea is I asked my wife what she thought. She goes, I don't know, go do what you do best. Go do research. Go back, figure it all out, and come back to me. And so I did. And so one of the first things I did was to see what else is on the market. The quick answer is there's nobody doing this in Canada. There's 2 in the US who come close. And I was able to get in touch with one of them who were just amazing, amazing human beings who told me their entire process, their entire story. Amazing company out of the West Coast of the US. But through all that, I also started to refine my positioning. So we started off with this savory peanut butter concept. And what I started to shift it towards was we weren't just savory, because I make cookies out of this and the crumble on top of apple crisp or cobbler, and so the savory was going to be a limiting factor. And I wanted this to be as broad and open as possible. And so thinking about it, I started playing around with the idea of, well, I'm using these global flavors, and if I'm doing global flavors, where did I discover most of these flavors while I was wandering around the world? And so that's what kind of led us to the name Wander. Was we want these to help you wander around the world. We want your brain to wander to different cuisines and how you can use it. And we came up with a couple of different taglines, spread the world being the biggest one, which ties in directly to what the product is and how most people will stereotypically use peanut butter.
What did you learn from the experience? What kind of takeaways are going to resonate with you as you keep, working the CPG world from the think tank end?
Yeah, there's a few big learnings I had. The first was a big blunder of my own making, and something that I think you and Alicia and most marketers will be like, oh yeah, of course you should have done this. Had planned to start my marketing 6 months before launch, and life kind of got in the way. So this was always a side business for us. And I set that up intentionally because my wife and I both have 9 to 5 jobs. I have an agency. She has her own career that she's just excelling in right now. Could not be prouder of her. And we have a daughter. So, for me, health and family always comes first. I have a team of 7 who I'm responsible for ensuring that they have a job and can take care of their own families. So kind of, Wanda always kind of played third fiddle, unfortunately. And leading up to when we were launching, a whole bunch of stuff all kind of hit all at once, and I just got very distracted. I just couldn't get stuff going in time. So that was a huge mistake and a huge learning of it is so important to start announcing anything you're going to do long before you're actually going to do it so that you can have an audience and have people be aware that you even exist. Because when you don't have that, particularly as a CPG product, especially a food and beverage product with an expiry date, the second you start doing manufacturing, you now have product that's expiring, you've laid out a ton of cash that you need to recoup somehow. Whereas before you do all that, you don't have those pressures. It also really messed up my sales forecast because I was expecting a certain level of awareness that would translate into a certain percentage of sales, and my awareness was nowhere close to what it needed to be. So that was a huge blunder on my part that I knew better. I mean, getting into this, I knew more about this than I would say the average founder would, just because of my exposure to everyone in the CPG space and being in it for so long. But that was a huge mistake. But my big 4 learnings were actually the big 4 reasons I shut down Wander, which is you need a huge amount, so much more than you possibly think you do, of margin, capital, time, and passion, purpose-driven passion. So for margin, if you don't have like a 50% plus margin on your wholesale price, you're going to have a very tough time growing. It's a little bit different in the US. The barriers to entry and the way you can grow organically, the ecosystem is way more friendly to startups than in Canada. Canada, realistically, these days to start a CPG brand, you need between $50,000 and $100,000 at the case. So if you don't have that cash immediately available to you, you are going for a really tough slog. Meaning going into the second one, capital. So I really bootstrapped this, really bootstrapped this. But I was under the impression from hearing about stories from the US and others in my industry that I might be able to make it work. And the quick answer is no, 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 no. You definitely need to have that amount. Time is a big one. I mean, we're all in marketing. We all do content of some nature or shape. You know, I thought I knew how much time it was going to take, especially on TikTok, but man, is that a time suck. Even if you're only producing the content one day a week, which all of these gurus and experts are telling you, you can just do it one day a week. It's so easy. First of all, it's not that easy. Second of all, it still takes a huge amount of time during the week to track all those ideas and be watching social all the time to put it all together and thinking about, oh, that's a cool trend. How can I twist that so it aligns to my brand and is authentic and isn't just me copying them because it's not getting any engagement if I'm just copying the little hook. And then once you start getting into retail stores, you've got to be visiting those stores at the beginning. Like every couple of weeks, you got to be in there talking to the staff, making sure you're merchandised properly. The more stores you get to, that can drop down to a month. But still, by that point, you're talking about 100+ doors. You have to go to all those stores to make sure everything's done right. Because if you don't, the reality is it's not going to be done right. The last one is the purpose-driven passion. So I had a very cool product, right? It was very neat, it's very tasty, as Shaun will attest, and people love the product. The challenge I find is that that's not enough for mainstream pickup anymore. And by that, I mean, if you look at all the brands who are really excelling, they all have everything I have: the clean label, the cool flavors, the better for you angle, but there's always that little something, something extra. It could be aligning to a specific diet. It could be having a very strong give back policy. It could be B Corp. It could be a lifestyle aspect, but whatever it is, there's got to be a bigger purpose around that brand. One, because consumers want it and are willing to pay the premium for it. But two, from a founder standpoint, when things get rough, which let me be very, very clear, as much fun as those 2 years were running Wander, they were also stressful as all heck, and I'm sure I've lost more hair and gotten more grays as a result of it. But when things get really tough, and you can look up on LinkedIn, you'll see all these founders say it. When things get tough, they say one of two things that gets them back on track. Either one, they get an email or a phone call from a customer just thanking them for the product and how it's changed their lives for the better, or they go back to why they started their company to begin with. And it's always because of a dietary, a lifestyle. They wanted to make a change. They wanted to have an impact of a specific realm. And as a result of that, that's what pushes you through those challenges. So makes you get out of bed when it's negative 20 outside and haul away to your manufacturing facility to go deal with a broken machine that's now going to delay an order going out to the biggest retailer in Canada that you have to somehow scramble to fix. You need that drive behind you to push through that type of that's a huge mountain to overcome. And so for us across the board, we just didn't have enough of any one of those core. And so for any founder or potential founder looking to start their company, it's so critical to me, at least from my standpoint, that you evaluate whether or not you do have lots of those available to you, and however much you think you need of capital and time in particular, double it, easily double it, because you're certainly going to need it, and way faster than you think you do too.
And that's brilliant stuff. I would say that anything in marketing, double it. The time, the investment, the amount of money, anything you think. That would be my tip for anyone starting out in marketing. Double whatever variable is going into that. And, it goes back to what we talked about with this podcast, how much time it takes. I wanted to talk to you about a few things you said earlier about starting earlier and starting much earlier than you think you're going to be starting, or than you think you need to start. So what are some tips you have with Think Tank or in your previous experience for brands that are going to be starting to launch? And what types of things can they do? Because a lot of people really don't know that whole area of the pre-launch. It's not really taught much, and no one really talks about it.
Yeah, for sure. So the big thing I think for any brand who's starting out, the reason you want to start early is that you can start sharing the journey you're on right from the get-go. And consumers across the board really want to see that whole journey, the highs, the lows, the good, the bad, every step of that process. So down in the US, there's this guy, Damien Law, a company called Effin' Good Snacks. I haven't tried his product yet, quite honestly, because he's only delivering it in the United States, and I'm obviously up here in Toronto. But he has done an exceptional job of executing what I think is one of the best go-to-market strategies, which is he started talking about his product easily 6 months before the launch. He started talking about his challenges in finding a co-manufacturer and developing the recipes and making it taste just right, figuring out the design of his packages. And he did all of this very publicly on TikTok, on Instagram. He's also on Facebook. He used YouTube Reels. And so, out the gate, you don't need to spend a lot of money on your marketing when you're in this pre-launch phase if you're just very cognizant and active in recording yourself and everything you're doing. And that's a big barrier for a lot of people. Lots of people don't like to record themselves, myself included, incidentally. I was just on another podcast a while ago, and she just sent me the file, and she says, "Hey, give it a listen." And I'm like, "Yeah, no. I trust your editing. I don't listen to my own podcasts. I hate listening to my own voice," which, as a content creator for my brand, sucks because that's all I had to do. And I hate looking at my own face, the whole thing. But you have to get really comfortable with that really quickly as an emerging brand. People want to know the founder. You can do it without being the face. You absolutely can, but it is so much harder. And so where I really dropped the ball is I should have started right as soon as I knew I was going to go live in that January. I should have started putting out messages saying, "Hey, here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm creating. Here's some of the behind the scenes. We just got our first demo print of our labels. Check these out." And all that stuff is, I was about to say free. It's not really free. It's a huge amount of time, but it's not a massive amount of time. And it certainly doesn't have any real capital cost to it. So right out the gate, that's really important. Another thing you should certainly be thinking about, especially if your plan is to get into retail within your first couple of years, you really need to be thinking about what your product looks on shelf. So that's your branding and packaging. And so, I like pointing out granola as a good category where it's a lot of the same. You look at that shelf, a lot of browns and a lot of greens. And so if you're a brand going in there and doesn't matter if you're a pouch or a box, if you're brown and green, you're going to look like everybody else, and I'm never going to spot you on that shelf. And so there's a company down in the US called Great Nola, and a few years back, they did this exact process. They looked at the category, looked at the trends, and said, "We want to be the exact opposite of all that." So their package color, purple. Except for one SKU that's charcoal based and that's black. But you know what stands out of that shelf? All their packaging. It screams out. So that's an American brand in Canada. There's a company called NAC. They're a granola energy bar that uses insect protein. They're bright yellow. Bright yellow. You cannot miss them on the huge crowded shelves of energy bars and granola bars in the better for you section. Their box stands out like a lighthouse on a foggy night. It is unreal. So as you think about how you're going to go to market, thinking about that branding aspect is so critical. And not just that, also your positioning, how you're going to differentiate yourself from everybody else, especially if it's a crowded category. Being just another keto brand in the space that already has three keto brands, how are you just going to stand out from that? What's going to make you pop? Is it going to be your design? Is it going to be your founder story? Is it going to be a give back? You've got to really think this through, because ultimately you need to convince a buyer that you're worth knocking someone off their shelf to put you on. And that buyer and category managers, all they care about is what products are going to have the highest velocity and make them the most money, because that's what they get measured on in their jobs. So when you're thinking about your branding, your packaging, how you're going to kind of take your story out to market, these are the things that I think you really need to be thinking about to be successful. Um, and not and it's part of that, as well as the research up front, to make sure that you actually have a viable product that people want. Lots of people kind of overlook this step and rush to get it into market, and then spend the first year taking customer feedback and modifying their products and adjusting it, which sometimes you can get away with. But every time you tweak a recipe, there's a whole bunch of costs that come with that, from R&D to changing your labels if it messes with your nutrition facts, to depending on what ingredients you add. Sometimes you have to put special disclaimers on different labeling regulations on both sides of the border. So I always like to think a little bit longer term. So it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It's better to move forward than to have absolute everything perfection, but you certainly need to do that research beforehand so you're as close to perfect as you can be.
You made a really interesting point. Having followed you on TikTok and talking about sort of the perils of making those videos, and following some of the founders that we both know, Erica Rankin and her Brodo, and
Mm-hmm.
Mike Fata and everything he's doing. How important is that founder storytelling and that sort of personality injection into the business? Do you find that really moves the needle when it comes to sort of building up brand loyalty?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's why you need to start your marketing and start telling your story so early on, because that's what. I mean, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but at the end of the day, consumers want your product, sure, but what brings them to your product isn't the product; it's the story. It's, why do I care about this product? What's this product bringing to me? Why is the founder getting involved? Why are they doing any of this? It's where like Damien does a great, Erica does a great job of that as well. Midday Squares is a powerhouse in that area. I mean, they're a CPG company, but to me, they're a media production company that happens to have a CPG product, right? They're so tuned into their story, and it's so authentic to who they are. Man-made the same way, the boxes I like and wear. I can just list off all these founders, and it's their stories and their challenges that bring me to love them, that bring you to love them, that bring consumers to them. And once you have that, to steal a Midday Square term, the tribe. Once you have that, that becomes your consumer, not only your consumer base, but your champion base. That's where you can get your top influencers, your top referrals into stores. They're the ones who are going to go into stores and take pictures of all the shelves for you, so you can do an audit for free versus having to pay a company to go do that, right? So that connection between the founder and the brand is really critical. And you can see the difference when a brand changes and that founder says, "Okay, I got to come out from the shadows. I have to start being the face of this and be more present and be more visible." And you just see the shift in the engagement rates on all their posts, and very frequently a big lift in sales as well, because now people know who the heck you are.
I think of the famous Super Bowl. Do you guys watch the Super Bowl? Is that a thing in Canada?
We don't get the ads quite the same way, but we get a lot of them.
Yeah, we have to go
Okay.
to YouTube afterwards to view them all, but we do see them, just not live.
Right on. I think it was last year, or maybe the year before, the founder of Oatly took out a 15-second spot of him playing on a keyboard and singing about Oatly in a field. Do you guys remember
Yep.
that? And they experts considered it to be the best ad of the Super Bowl, and I just thought it was really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I fully believe that, because again, especially in a space like that, you really need to. The product claims themselves aren't necessarily unique in the market. I mean, Oatly was one of the first to really push the. I mean, they are the reason oat milk is as popular as it is. Just to like not to knock down the brand in any way, shape, or form. But ultimately, their product not that different than any other oat milk, right? But it's the whole story behind them and the way that like they redid their packaging just to stand out more. Again, so founder story is very important, but you can't overlook all these other aspects too, right?
What's the biggest mistake that you have seen? You don't have to name names, but you've seen a CPG brand make in their marketing that was just absolutely embarrassing level disaster.
That's a great question. Branding is
That
as
is
much
a really good
as much
question.
you branding is as much as what you don't want to be as what you are, right? It's as much as your mistakes as it is your successes.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really good question, and I try really hard to avoid negatives because who needs that type of downer in your life? There's enough going on in the world that's depressing. I don't need more. But what I will say, an area that I find a lot of brands overlook is understanding the consumer's actual level of awareness and understanding of what their brand is. And so, having talked to a number of merchandising companies and those who go out into the field for these brands, there's a number of them who have done these really large, extravagant in-store display setups that are lovely, but don't actually say what the product is or how to use it. And as a new brand, unless it's super, super clear what you are, all the displays in the world aren't going to make me buy you if I don't know what the heck you are. And so, there was this is an example that comes immediately to the top of mind. There was a display at one of our retailers recently I was walking through, and the display caught me dead because it was talking about goat milk. And I'm like, but I'm over in the pharmacy section. Why is this all goat milk? I don't understand. And there's nothing on the display as a shipper. I'm looking at the displays, can't figure it out. I actually have to pick up the bottle and spin it around to find, and it wasn't even super clear on the bottle. It was a bubble bath. It was a goat milk bubble bath. But for the life of me, it took me forever to figure out what the heck this thing was. And thank goodness I'm a marketer, and it was so curious that it actually stopped me in my tracks. Like, what the heck is this? Because your average consumer would take one look at it and be like, wow, that's weird. Milk's not in the freezer and keep in the fridge and keep walking. Right? So it's that type of disconnect where especially if you're a new brand and a new founder, you get so caught up in what you're doing. I mean, we all do this. We all think everybody knows everything we're doing. We put something out there, we assume everybody sees it. Anyone who works in social knows that's absolutely not the case. Some micro percentage of your followers ever see any post you actually put out there. But the same thing holds true for retail. You might um, you know, I can name a couple brands right now that I and probably a few thousand people might know of across the country or across North America, but your average consumer has no idea who the heck this brand is. And if they go and spend a huge ton in market, if they don't tell you exactly what they are and who they are, there's going to be another product. They're like, yeah, okay, and they're not going to get that. So I think that's one of the biggest mistakes is really making sure that consumers are very aware of you, but also understand what you are and how they can use you and the value you bring to their lives.
I love that. We have one more question. That's your surprise question. Shaun, did you
All right,
think
Oh,
of
that
one?
was
surprise me.
my surprise. That was it.
All right, I
Unless
have
you
one
got
then.
one. You got
You
one.
want
Go
to do
for it,
that
and
was
then we'll
do
let
you
me
want to do
go.
surprising.
the same one we asked Anna, or do you want to do a different one? Jared,
No, you can do it.
did you watch the end of the last episode? Do you know what that
I haven't
question is?
yet. I haven't. I
Okay.
have it
All
teed
right.
up and queued. I haven't gone to it yet.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll ask that one. What is an unpopular opinion you have?
Oh, I have so many. Oh wow. I can just take this in so many different angles. Where do I want to go with it? Uh, I think the plant-based hype is overhyped. It is not going to be the end-all, be-all, life-saving, planet-saving thing that everybody thinks it is. And I see a future where it is a blend of more sustainably farmed products, a certain level of plant-based, because we also all immediately assume I'm talking about analogs, and I'm not. There's a huge demand right now for whole food, plant-based, of companies like Holy Veggie, Soul Cuisine, and the like, who are going to do exceptionally well. Meat analogs are certainly not the answer. I think they're all garbage. But I do see a huge future for cultivated or cultured. And for those who aren't familiar with that, that's using bacteria to create dairy products or meat products. So there's no animal involved. And it is a very intriguing field, and I know there's a lot of people in the plant-based, vegetarian, vegan realm who are kind of against it for various reasons, and it makes a lot of current consumers a little squeamish depending on how you frame it up. But particularly for dairy, I see it a very easy conversation there because we already use bacteria to turn milk into cheese and yogurt. So this is the same thing. We're just turning water into milk. Amazing.
That was awesome.
I applaud your ability to weave the unpopular opinion into the rest of this podcast content.
Thank you. I mean, it's all connected, right? I
Thanks.
mean, it's the one thing that I think everybody is starting to recognize now, as the war in Ukraine really made so clear about how things are so connected globally. I think both between the pandemic and the war, it's also really illustrated what goes into a product, how many people are involved, how many different companies have to touch that product from the first ingredient going in to you taking a bite out of it. And I think it's been a great thing for society at large to be paying way more attention to our food and the food ecosystem. And there's still a lot of things that need to be fixed. The system is very broken, especially in Canada. But there's people trying to change that, and I applaud them, and I wish them all the best. And I'm trying to help them out as best as I can too. But it's a slow slog for sure. But it's all connected. All connected.
Incredible. Thank you so much.
This was a trip. This was wild. Jared, thank you so much for joining us, for your wisdom, for your time, for your big personality. It'll be invaluable to our listeners, and we will promote it as such. So hopefully it gets a lot of notice because it deserves it.
Oh, thank you both for having me. I absolutely love being on here. Love what you two are creating. I love all the talk about all the marketing expertise and wisdom you two drop on a regular basis. So, privileged to be here, and I just love the experience. Thanks for having me.
Wow. This is me trying to cram my brain back into my head because I think it just exploded.
Yeah, that was really incredible stuff. Really, a lot of takeaways, I think, that extend far beyond the CPG and just into marketing in general and owning a business in general, especially a lot of what he said around starting early and really getting out there, and people want to see the process.
I think my two biggest takeaways were one from him and one from you. Funny enough, is starting early, and his bit about starting the 6 months ahead of time. And it's funny, I had questions prepped at asking about his generic CPG experience at the agency, but we really kind of mostly talked about Wander and his expertise there, and it taught him so many lessons. But starting early, and two, double. If you have an expectation of time, of budget, of this and that, double it. If you want to do it right, it's going to take you longer. It's going to cost you more. It's going to take more involvement. It's going to take more time from you. But my goodness, it'll be worthwhile. And it's so much better to start on the right foot than it is to start your marketing wrong and try to work backwards and save yourself. You're just going to be constantly chasing your tail.
Yeah, absolutely. If there was anything I've learned, you got to make space for the work, because there's going to be trial and error too, especially if you're taking on a project that is newer, a new client, a new industry. The research. I mean, we think back, as every year that goes by, we are further away from our college days, but you remember cramming last minute, like trying to learn and study, and it's like,
oh, I never studied, so you're talking to the wrong guy.
Yeah, you're just one of those savants that you never had to study.
I just like coasted with my B's and kind of got on with my life.
Okay, for the people listening who did study in college, you have to find that time. And it's going to be a lot more time than you think with anything worth doing. It just takes a lot of time and practice.
We talked about this podcast. I mean, I love that we do this. I love that you talked me into this. I think it's the greatest thing, that the two of us at least have done together. It's not easy. It's time consuming. We had a meeting earlier this week, talked about strategy for next season. We want to do all these cool things, but you and I both have, busy days, and we each have agencies and other commitments. And so it's a heavy lift, but it's worth it.
Absolutely. And I love what Jared said about, putting yourself out there and the founder becoming part of the brand and the story. the story behind, I mean, really, if anything, capsules what we're doing here, making sure you tell the story from the beginning, the initial concept that the consumer really wants to see that, whether it's B2B or B2C, whether it's, strategic planning or high level consulting or accounting or whatever, all the way down to, a toothbrush. They want to see how things happen. Consumers want to see that now. The curtain is pulled back and they want to see everything. They have an endless quest, endless thirst for wanting to see what's going on with
You
where
know,
they're spending their
the,
money.
the only thing that makes your business unique is you. And, we've both said that to our clients and to each other. Your product might be unique and that's great, but what really is going to make you stand out is you. And, the point that I make to my clients, and I joke about it, but it's true, is that looking busy is the precursor to being busy. And so, that ability to really look busy, you're doing this, you're planning this, you're meeting with this supplier and this distributor, and you're on this podcast and this call. That's all great feeder for social. That shows people that you are hustling, you are in it, you are working hard, you are committed to your success, and will be similar to theirs. That is all a great thing to post about. So people don't know, what to post on social. Post that.
Mm-hmm.
Put that up. That is part of your brand story. That is part of your business story.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, let's wrap it up. Episode
Let's
10,
wrap it
season
up. Yep.
finale.
Season 10 finale. Find us. You can find Branding and the Beast on YouTube for a video podcast or on any of your podcast platforms for the audio version. You can find each of us. I am The Right Stuff Agency, WRITE, at therightstuff.agency. I'm on LinkedIn as myself and as the agency. I am on Instagram. I am on Facebook. I am on Twitter. Send a carrier pigeon. I will find you that way. I'm everywhere. And what about you?
He's everywhere. I'm almost everywhere, not as much everywhere as him. 38th and Kip. That's 38 TH and Kip, KIP. Find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, 38andkip.com. Just search 38th and Kip Design and I will come up.
Wonderful. All right. That is it for season 1. Virtual high five. And we will see you in the spring for season 2. Can't wait.